lots of familiar faces. Thank you for coming back. I was saying to Jill when I got here, this is like coming home week. You know, I see a lot of familiar faces. Thank you. It was last year. I mean, the years are flying by faster and faster, aren't they? They're like the deadlines, you know, as they wish by. But last year we talked about the butterfly's daughter and that amazing insect, and that's still a fascination of mine, and always will be. If you come to my website or to my, come to Facebook. Do any of you do Facebook? Good. Come to my Facebook for a couple of reasons. One is I'm putting pictures of my new butterfly garden, and I'm trying to encourage people to realize how much fun a butterfly garden can be and how easy it is. And I don't know how many of you got milkweed seeds from me last year, but if you want milkweed seeds, you know, I'll help you get some. But I'm really honored that I was notified that the butterfly's daughter was a SIBA finalist. That's a big deal. It really is. Each book you write, you know, is the best book that you write, that you think it can be when you send it out. What was interesting for me about the butterfly's daughter, I write about a lot of different species, and with the butterfly, for those of you who heard me talk about it last year, there was so much to work with as an inspirational source. Metamorphosis alone, I could have written a novel just on that. So my challenge for that book was to write a book that was not going to hit you over the head with all the symbolism. Because that's not my job as a writer. I'm not writing nonfiction. The challenge is for me to write an entertaining story with great plot, dialogue, pathos, but that will provide information without you wanting to skip through the pages. You know, I think that's really critical and hard for me as an author to determine how much is enough. So for The Butterfly's Daughter, there was very little introspective thought. That was the decision on my part, because there was so much symbolism with the butterfly. I used a lot of dialogue. With the Beach House Memories, this is the story of a woman's journey, a personal journey, a woman's reflections on a long life that's finishing up. I needed to have a lot of introspective thought for this book. You know, this was a completely, it's how I approach every novel that I write. I've written about a lot of different species, you know, birds of prey, skyward, and I think I've spoken about a lot of them right here, haven't I? Sweetgrass, the landscape plant that we make the baskets out of in Mount Pleasant, along the coast, from North Carolina all the way to Florida. Butterflies, and of course, turtles. I think that's the one topic I come back to all the time, are the turtles. But because this book was about a woman, how do I make it different? I've written a book about a woman when she was in her 40s, I've written a book about a woman in her 60s, I've written a book about women in their 20s. This is a retrospective. So I thought I'd share with you today how I came about writing this trilogy that was never meant to be a trilogy when I started out. I like to say it was a trilogy 10 years in the making. My career actually, last night we had the launch party at the South Carolina Aquarium, and I do hope you all come to the South Carolina Aquarium. It's marvelous, it really is. We have the new Madagascar exhibit. Joel, if I turn,
I can turn it now.
well, actually, I think if I just move this, it'll be more steady, so I don't pop your ears out. Is that better? I just don't want to pop your ears every time I turn my head. But do come to the South Carolina Aquarium. It's a wonderful place, it really is. And I was speaking there last night, and it was filled with women who were turtle ladies. You know, a lot of them. And a lot of them were turtle ladies because they read The Beach House. And that was 10 years ago. And it's just so hard for me to realize 10 years. And in reflection, this trilogy is reflection of my experience with sea turtles and this whole career that started with the environmental fiction with The Beach House 10 years ago. When I wrote The Beach House, I became a turtle lady in the year 2000. And I didn't know that my curiosity about sea turtles would become a lifelong passion. I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to write a book set against the sea turtles. Once I became a sea turtle lady, and which meant that I was on the beach every morning, I'm moving the nests, I was licensed by DNR, but more importantly, I got involved with the people who came to the beach. The children with their big eyes, the mothers and grandmothers with eyes every bit as big, because they were fascinated with this charismatic reptile that's an ancient mariner that has been coming to our beaches for over 180 million years. And they had questions and were curious. And we were talking at the table about teachers, and you know, once a teacher, you're always a teacher. I say that all the time. And I knew that I could write a book that made my readers aware of the dangers present for the sea turtles. I wrote about a woman called Olivia Rutledge, Lovey. And I didn't realize at that time that she would become one of my most beloved characters. And her daughter, Coretta, she named her daughter after the sea turtle, Coretta, much to Cara's chagrin. And I think it's a lovely name, and I'm only sorry I didn't name one of my daughters Coretta. I think it's very cool. Maybe a granddaughter someday, if I can convince my daughter. I doubt it, but I'll try. But Lovey was a little passionate, maybe a little obsessively passionate about sea turtles. But so was I. I got up in the morning because, you know, here I'm doing research and I'm in love, and this is how I approach all my books. I just dive in. And I was getting up before dawn every morning and walking the beaches because I wanted to see a turtle. And there's no time, you know, 11 o'clock you get out there. Maybe if you live in Florida along Juno Beach, yes, you will see sea turtles, I promise you, if you go out. Because there's thousands of them. But on Isle of Palm, we get 50 to 80, so I wasn't quite sure. But I saw one, and I'll never forget the night I saw that sea turtle lumber ashore with that crawl. And you're mesmerized. It was really a magical night, just like I described in the beach house, where it was bright with the moon and a scarred beach, and you saw this creature like a prehistoric dinosaur come ashore and lay her eggs. When you see the hatchlings come out, and are there any biologists here? Last night I got frowns when I called the hatchlings babies. But that's what we call them, babies, because we're mamas and we see these sweet, adorable little critters, you know, the hundreds running out to they're our babies. I have seen a lot of different species. I've worked with them, as you know, as you read my books. But there's a certain intimacy that we get with sea turtles that I wanted to share in this novel. I think it's the woman in us, the feminine, that when we see a sea turtle lay her eggs, and we see the tears, and we watch this process of the covering up, and even though she goes off, it's her biological model to go off and to abandon her nest. That's okay. She has turtle eggs to look out for. But that's her model. It's predator glut. She just lays a lot of, she's a reptile. She lays a lot, and she's assuming out of that mass, a few will survive. Unlike a dolphin or a human, where you have one, two, where you protect and you guide for years. But there's that intimacy and connection of watching this mother lay her eggs. And then when we watch the nest erupt and we guide the hatchlings to the sea, again, that's a very intimate, maternal connection. And I felt it very strongly, and I think that's what people connected to when they read The Beach House 10 years ago, was that feminine, that sense of the feminine that unites us all. And men too. I want to include my token male in the audience. Thank you. But I think we have a lot of turtle guys out there, turtle guys too. In fact, Archie Carr is the great-grandfather of research for our sea turtles, and he's a guy. Then if you read Swimming Lessons, the next book, which I didn't anticipate to write a sequel, but that followed the story of Toy and the family, because I learned that the Sea Turtle Hospital was beginning at the South Carolina Aquarium. Once again, I didn't realize that this would be another major part of my life. Every sea turtle that is described in that book is a patient that I worked with at the hospital. For 2 years I was a volunteer working with the patients. And I wanted to describe then what we were witnessing out on the beaches. In South Carolina, we are seeing an increase in sea turtles now, but there's also an increase in patients. A lot of the sea turtles are hit by propellers from boats, or because the oceans are sick. We're getting sea turtles that have been floating in the water for weeks from some illness. They can't die for their food, so they float. I swear these sea turtles live for 3 weeks, a month, and they don't die. They're just on the verge of death by the time they become a stranding. It's what we report when we see as a turtle on the beach. Most strandings are dead, but every once in a while we get that turtle that's near to death. And my gosh, those turtles are resilient. They can be hit by boats, they can be bitten by sharks, they can have papillomavirus, they can be sick, they're beaten and battered, and they survive. And that image of resilience rang true to me in my novel, Swimming Lessons. A couple years later, my daughter, who's now in her late 20s, decided she'd read her mama's books. And she read The Beach House, and she said, "Mama, I don't see why that woman just didn't divorce her husband." And I looked at her and I thought, my. You didn't understand, little girl, what it was like to be a woman and a wife in Charleston, south of Broad, in 1970s. She asked that question because she and I were talking about a fundraiser we were doing for a local women's shelter. And today we have shelters for women of spousal abuse to go to. In South Carolina, we are very, very high, number 1, number 2 in the state in incidents against spousal abuse. And so that's still a very hot button issue here in South Carolina and across the nation. And it crosses all financial, economic class levels.